Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to H.R. 514, which would reauthorize expiring provisions of the Patriot Act without important modifications necessary to safeguard our civil liberties. While the threat of terrorism is real and law enforcement must have the right tools to protect Americans, any counterterrorism measure must have a solid constitutional footing and respect for privacy and civil liberties of the American people. This legislation fails to address shortcomings in the original Patriot Act legislation, and for that reason I will vote against it. One of the major problems with this bill is its failure to address the issuance and use of national security letters. These letters permit the government to obtain the communications of anyone deemed relevant to a terrorism investigation, even if that person is not suspected of unlawful behavior. If Congress reauthorizes these provisions with no changes, Americans will remain subject to warrantless intrusions into their personal affairs, a gross overreach of federal investigative authority that should not or that could be abused. It's just not how we do things in this country. Rather than taking the time to craft reforms that will better protect private citizens' communications and privacy from overbroad government surveillance, the Republican majority simply wants to cram this bill through without providing any opportunity for anyone to offer amendments that will improve the bill. We all acknowledge that law enforcement needs new tools to keep up with 21st century threats, but surely it is the responsibility of Congress to re-examine legislation that was hurriedly passed through Congress in the wake of 9/11 to make sure it lives up to our national ideals. Because this bill fails to contain any checks and balances to prevent law enforcement abuse and protect civil liberties, I will be voting against it, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, 7.5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close when the gentleman from Michigan yields back the balance of his time.
Gentleman's time has expired. All the time from the gentleman from Michigan has expired. The gentleman from Texas has 7.5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield myself the balance of my time.
Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, extending the expiring provisions of the Patriot Act will ensure that America's law enforcement officials and intelligence agents are equipped to identify terrorist threats and prevent terrorist acts. The Patriot Act is an effective tool in the war on terror. As terrorists show no signs of ending their plots, neither should our laws that stop them be allowed to sunset. This temporary extension will facilitate further review and reauthorization of these provisions. And, Mr. Speaker, this extension is supported by the Obama administration. I urge my colleagues to support this extension as well and yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 514? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended.
Mr. Speaker,